Welcome to another episode on my YouTube channel, Corey's Cave. If you're not already subscribed, consider subscribing if you like this content. Let's jump right in. Today I want to talk about microgreen shelf life and what you can do to really maximize that. It's a question that comes up a lot about how long microgreens last in a refrigerator or at a restaurant, in their cooler, or at a retailer. And I want to talk a little bit about how you can really make sure you're getting the longest shelf life out of that. And at the end of this video, I'll show you some of my microgreens that I pulled off a retail shelf yesterday that are about 18 days old, 16 to 18 days old, and that they're perfect. We'll show you that. So I was going to do this in an order of importance, of like most important to least. But as I thought about that, I was like, they're all almost equally important, each of the steps I want to talk about today. So we're going to start with watering your microgreens. So when you harvest your microgreens, if you're not washing them, which most people are not, and I am not, you want to make sure that they're as dry as they can be before you harvest them. The reason for that is that microgreens in a container, if they're damp, they're going to rot fairly quickly. They'll get nasty and gooey and gross. And so what I do is I won't water my microgreens the day that I harvest, and I harvest at night or in the evening. So it's usually about 6 o'clock or so after we've had dinner. I'll come in my microgreens room and I'll throw in some ear pods and listen to an audio book and start harvesting. And I will water the night before I am going to harvest. So by the time I'm harvesting at 6 o'clock the next night, it's been about 24 hours since they've been watered, and the grow medium is starting to get kind of dry. The microgreens are not getting limp yet, but another 12 hours or so, and they would start to literally fall over. So it's kind of a fine line there. And there's some other things you can do to help with that as well, like run a dehumidifier. Make sure your humidity is less than or equal to about 40%. That helps a lot with keeping your microgreens dry. Airflow is really big as well. Basically, you don't want to be cutting into your microgreens and having your hands be wet because they're so wet, because that's just going to lead to them rotting while they're in the package. The second thing you can do to really help maximize your microgreen shelf life is to use a sealed container. That's a question that comes up a lot. Should you use containers with holes or not? And I only use sealed clamshells for mine. Yes, it's plastic. Everybody complains about plastic in my videos all the time. I have yet to see good alternatives to that. If you have one, go ahead and let me know. And if you're going to say corn-based, vegetable, whatever, plastic, just be aware that you can't just compost that yourself. That ends up usually in a landfill, because that, to be broken down and composted, it has to be taken to a special place to do that. So if you're using that kind of plastic, it's probably better than an oil-based plastic, but just understand that you're not really probably doing the world the favor you think you're doing. It will eventually break down, but it's not that great. So anyways, I use a clamshell, and I use one that's not vented. And the reason for that is a lot of refrigeration, especially like a home refrigerator, has it's like an anti-frost thing built in. So it's always pulling moisture out. So if you put in anything that you leave in your refrigerator, it's going to basically dehydrate it, because it's the anti-frost feature of the refrigerator. And it's also just a side effect of refrigeration in general, that it can dehydrate items that are in there. Now, if you are storing your microgreens in just like a cold box, a cooler, or anything else that doesn't have one of those defrost features, they'll probably last just fine in a vented clamshell. I personally just don't use it. I have always had good luck with my non-vented. Now, like I said, if you were to use a vented clamshell in a regular refrigerator, in like 2 days max, your microgreen is going to begin to wilt. And We don't want that. We want to maximize how long our microgreens will last in refrigeration. Now, the third thing is one that I don't think a lot of people are aware of, and it's not something I think people really think about that much, and that is light. So while your microgreens are being stored, if they're in any sort of refrigeration or cooler, anything like that, they're fine because they're out of the light. But when you start putting them on store shelves is when you'll learn about the problems of having your microgreens in any sort of light at all. Um, Obviously, you want them to be in a lit area where you can see them and they can, customers will notice them. But the closer you are to any sort of lights, the quicker that they're going to break down the microgreens. They really do not like being under light while they're being stored on a store shelf. Um, it's another one of those things where it's a really fine line of, if there's multi shelves on a store's display case, um, you may not want to be on the very top shelf if that's where the light is going to be closest. You kind of want to be somewhere away from the light, but still in a lit enough area where people are going to notice your microgreens. In my experience, when I've gone to a retailer and found that my microgreens were not lasting as long as I thought that they should, it was generally light, a light issue, more so than how cold they were kept or not cold enough. Which brings us to probably our final topic on keeping microgreens fresh. They want to be stored cold, but you don't want them to get anywhere near freezing. Uh, Even storing them in your own refrigerator. Like I said, I store mine in a refrigerator before I bring them out to sell them. If they're too close to, depending on the quality of the refrigerator, if they're too close to like the back wall or too close to where the cold air blows in, that can freeze your microgreens and that will ruin them. Frozen microgreens are disgusting. They turn to goo really quick. I do not recommend that. So you definitely don't want them getting too cold. However, they will last pretty well at room temperature. So if somebody is taking them from a cool place, like a refrigerated area, and putting them out in sort of a room temperature, you don't want them to get too hot, say like 65 degrees Fahrenheit, they can last on a shelf most of the day just fine, and then at the end of the day get put back into refrigeration. That's if you're doing it that way. That will shorten their life a little bit to be at room temperature like that, and it's also going to depend on the variety of microgreen. I find that in general, the smaller the variety of microgreen, the shorter its lifespan is on the shelf. And that can change depending on whether or not you mix them in with other microgreens. So something like amaranth. I find that just straight up amaranth in a container, sealed container on a store shelf, um, it can last 2 weeks, but it's definitely, you're seeing some changes there. It's going to start to settle in the package and it's just not going to be as great as it was when you brought it there. Where something like a pea shoot, 2 weeks later, you wouldn't even know the difference between if it was just harvested or if it was, 2 weeks ago. I label all my microgreens for retail with a best by date. And what I do is I add 14 days to the day that I harvested them. And that's not always preferable, but for stores, it is. At least in my experience, is that if you go to a store, you don't always look to see, is it a harvested date? Is it a sell by date? Is it a best by date? You typically just see those dates as expiration dates, like used by this date. That's the way that stores usually work. Any salad mixes, anything like that, you're going to go buy at a store, it's going to have a use by date or a sell by date. You'll almost never see a harvested by date. That's a little unfortunate in a way because you really want to be able to, brag to your customer about, hey, this was harvested yesterday or 2 days ago, where everything else in this store was shipped in and who knows how old it is. But unfortunately, it's just, for me, it does not work that way in a retail setting. Now, if I'm selling directly to chefs or directly to customers, then I will actually use a harvested by or harvested on date. And that's because I can actually talk to them and convey to them that, hey, this was harvested today, and they'll understand that date rather than them just picking it up off a shelf, seeing the date was 2 days ago and putting it back. That's happened to everybody in a store I know at least me, if I'm buying salad blends or anything, the first thing I look at is the date on it. And you're not always going to pay attention to whether or not that was a harvested date. You could put 2 dates on there, harvested on and Best Buy, but now you're just confusing everybody. So let's go over those topics again of what makes a long shelf life microgreen. First is making sure that they're dry when you pack them. Do not pack wet microgreens or they will get disgusting. Second is using a sealed container for refrigeration. And third was keeping them out of direct light as much as you can, within reason. And fourth was temperature. Obviously keeping them cold, not so cold they're gonna freeze. They can get a little bit warm, but not so warm that they're actually like really warm to the touch. They'll go bad. All right, let's dig into some microgreens I pulled off the store shelf yesterday. These are a microgreens chef's blend is what I call it. The chefs really liked that when I sold to restaurants before the pandemic. I haven't done that since the pandemic. Getting ready to maybe consider doing that again. Have mixed feelings about selling to restaurants, but we'll see. So anyways, these were marked for a Best Buy date of February 28th. Today is March 3rd, and I pulled them off the shelf on the 2nd. So let's just say that these were harvested, most likely these were harvested on February 14th. And they look perfect, absolutely amazing. So what's in this blend is there's radish in here. There is the True Leaf Market's spicy salad mix, which is like arugula, mustard, there's cabbage, there's a couple other things in there. That's tossed in here. There's quite a bit of amaranth, red garnet amaranth in here. And I've talked about my blends before on this channel, and they're mostly consistent. There's some things that will almost always be in my blend, and those are like kind of the base of the mix, which is especially radish. That radish really adds a lot to the weight of the blend. So radish and cabbage is another one that's almost always in there. I usually have an arugula. Sometimes I actually throw in other things. Like the other day I made a blend and I threw in some carrots and I threw in some red lipstick or pink lipstick chard. It allows me to grow other fun things that I wouldn't necessarily sell on their own, but I just throw them in the mix. It changes just about every week by a little bit, but some things stay consistent. So I just took this lid off. These are Dart containers. I was using Genpack, but they jacked the price up quite a bit. And I found the Dart to be a lot less expensive. These are 12-ounce containers. I find that a 12-ounce container can easily fit 1.5 ounces of microgreens. Basically, every microgreen I've ever grown, I can fit in 1.5 ounces in there just fine. 2 ounces in a 16-ounce clamshell. Somebody on Facebook got really bent out of shape when I said that. Said it wasn't true, but whatever. You guys do whatever you want to do. Like I said, this is a huge mix, all different things in here, and they look perfect. 16 days old. There's no wilting in here. Everything looks just fine. See if I can get a little clump here to give them a little taste test. It tastes great. To me, these taste just like I just harvested them. Not a big difference. I have a couple more containers of these, and I'm actually going to keep them for myself and use them in my salads at home. That radish really coming through. You'd be surprised at how much amaranth also in a mix. It's not just a color enhancer. You can really taste it. That's going to do it for today. I hope you learned something about how to maximize your microgreen shelf life. If you have any more questions, if there's something I didn't cover, please let me know in the comments. I almost always reply to comments. If I see them, I will reply. Not always instantly, but as quick as I can. And if you like this video, please consider giving me a thumbs up. It helps spread the videos out to other people so they can see them as well. Thanks for watching.